My son is a digital native, and as it can be for other students like him, as they think and process and sift through copiously amounts of available information and move like the wind doing it, outdated teaching methods can stifle them. A high school science teacher once told me my son was the most brilliant he had ever encountered. He was the first to bring a laptop to his school to take notes and got his first job so he could buy it himself. Able to discuss concepts and ask questions that demonstrate true knowledge and not just memorization. Yet he would not perform well in those science tests, which the teacher apologized for, saying his hands were tied. For my son, there was a number of ways to respond to the questions, yet the multiple choice answers did not expect that kind of depth of thinking. If it were up to me, your son would have earned the highest grade I have ever given, but I can only use the test grades, and those tests are not designed for his level and kind of learning. So that he could travel with me, my son had just come from 2 years of a media-rich online with teachers program where he had unlimited access to materials to satisfy his intellectual curiosity. Like many of his generation and those after, they easily lose attention and get bored. Even in university, he just could not understand why they had to memorize so many things in biology that can so easily be looked up and accessed. But the course was being taught in the same manner as it had been before the internet because that was how that professor had learned. Graded on how many labels you can spit back on a test? What was the point in that? So biology became one of his minor studies, and he went on to more mind-challenging and thus interesting fare. I raised a thinker. Not the easiest thing to do in the current Canadian educational system. Your son is having a problem with math, the grade 7 teacher scowled at me. I was shocked. He had always done very well in math. Perhaps this last mood had been more difficult than I realized, I thought. Concerned, I moved in closer and asked, how so? He doesn't use his ruler. I was confused. They were working on long division, I thought. I didn't know you were studying geometry now, I said. We're not. We're doing long division. Ruler? Let me show you, she said. She then drew a backwards C, placed the ruler at the top, and drew a straight line to set up a long division question. I burst out laughing. You use a ruler to do that? I said, still laughing. Talk about a slow start to a math problem. Let me show you how I do that. I drew it swiftly and freehand. I always had straight A's in math. Then I asked if there was anything else I should be made aware of. She offered nothing, and I stormed off. What nonsense. My son is highly creative. He does not color inside the lines for anyone. I sure hope he never does. Indigenous people are deep, complex thinkers, able to draw upon generational sources of knowledge. Though much effort has been and continues to be made to shame them into not thinking, to just doing as told to do. This bullying does not meet any standard enabling provision of fully informed and freely provided consent. Instead, that mirrors attitudes and how things were done in residential schools. But pushing those buttons can still work. A lot of Indigenous people have been conditioned in residential schools and elsewhere, like law school. Hearing or reading such things from educated people who look like you and are not wearing black robes must be even more effective, especially if those educated people have been conditioned to believe they are acting in the best interests of the people. Having to decide whether to trust someone or not, to trust some initiative or not, or to blindly go along as told or risk carrying a label is not the exercise of making a fully informed and freely provided decision to consent. Yet, as these outdated efforts proceed, others have begun to learn from Indigenous nations. The American Indian approaches to child guidance revealed in this paper are advocated by some of the world's most renowned child psychologists. This is from 1979. As opposed to the contemporary white culture's pressure on children to become independent, assertive, and competitive at an early age, the child must first have opportunities to be dependent, learn to respect and value elders, and be taught to obey through explanations for desired behavior. Clearly, once again, beneficial approaches to life have been revealed in the Native American culture. These lessons should be heard by contemporary teachers. Harriet K. Light, Child Development and Family Relations, and Ruth E. Martin, Institute of Teacher Education, North Dakota State University, Guidance of American Indian Children, Their Heritage and Some Contemporary Views, Journal of American Indian Education, Volume 25, Number 1, October 1985. This is the reconciliation, the mutually beneficial relationship, the exchange confirmed by treaties. The newcomers would share new technology and introduce the money trade item, while the indigenous nations would share their advanced societal precedents, experience, and knowledge, together hand in hand towards a better world. For as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, the rivers flow. Since Appleseed, West Bank Indian Band is no more. There is now the West Bank First Nation. West Bank First Nation means the body of people formerly known as the Band under the Indian Act and became a legal entity with the rights, powers, and privileges of a natural person under an act to give effect to the West Bank First Nation Self-Government Agreement, 2004. So in 2004, the band members of the West Bank Band of Indians were incorporated as West Bank First Nation, being a new legal entity created by federal legislation, a mere creature of the law. In 1844, in Louisville, CNR versus Letson, the Supreme Court of the United States held as follows. It may be said that the suit is against the corporation, and that nothing must be looked at but the legal entity, and then that we cannot view the members except as an artificial aggregate. A corporation created by a state to perform its functions under the authority of that state, and only suable there, though it may have members out of the state, seems to us to be a person, though an artificial one, inhabiting and belonging to that state, and therefore entitled, for the purpose of suing and being sued, to be deemed a citizen of that state. It is that a corporation created by and doing business in a particular state is to be deemed to all intents and purposes as a person, although an artificial person, an inhabitant of the same state for the purposes of its incorporation, capable of being treated as a citizen of that state as much as a natural person. Like a citizen, it makes contracts, and though in regard to what it may do in some particulars it differs from a natural person, and in this especially the manner in which it can sue and be sued, it is substantially within the meaning of the law a citizen of the state which created it, and where its business is done, for all the purposes of suing and being sued. And in coming to this conclusion as to the character of a corporation, we only make a natural inference from the language of this court upon another occasion and assert no new principle. In the case of Dartmouth College versus Woodward, this court says, a corporation is an artificial being, invisible, intangible, and existing only in contemplation of law. Being the mere creature of law, it possesses only those properties which the charter of its creation confers upon it, either expressly or as incidental to its very existence. These are such as were supposed best calculated to effect the object for which it was created. Again, the Providence Bank and Billings, it is said the great object of an incorporation is to bestow the character and properties of individuality on a collective and changing body of men. Interestingly, assimilate is a synonym for incorporate.